Sound Judgment in Alcoholics Anonymous. Hello to all the fellow members of the Alcoholics Anonymous community. Welcome to your channel, AA Experiences. Next, we will break down a very interesting and very important pamphlet within our recovery process, which is Sound Judgment. We invite you to subscribe if you are new to the channel, and in the comment section, leave us any suggestions so we can break them down and work on them. Also, share these videos with the members of your group so that more people are informed about our illness. Let's begin. Sanity comes from the Latin word sanitas and means healthy or sound. The ancient Roman saying mens sana in corpore sano translates into Spanish as a healthy mind in a healthy body, for the healthy mind in a healthy body. For the Romans, this meant a person healthy in their entirety, a person with sound judgment or mental health. And now we are learning more and more that many of the so-called mental illnesses have their origin in the individual's physical state. This has given rise to a completely new concept of research in medicine and psychiatry, the technique of psychosomatic medicine. Thus, when we talk about sound judgment, we are talking about the health of the whole person, since only this could ensure a solid adaptation to reality. Someone may now ask pertinent questions such as these. What is this issue we now hear about neurosis? And what does it have to do with preserving our sound judgment? What is a neurotic? Am I a neurotic? Am I mentally ill? We do not even attempt to give a technical answer to these questions, but we will give an answer that has worked for us, and that is very practical, useful, and effective. We are also convinced that using this approach to live will be of immense help in keeping our neurotic and emotional problems under control to avoid resorting to alcohol, drugs, or whatever dependency one may have. A neurotic person is someone who reacts to life situations according to nervous, emotional, and sentimental impulses instead of according to reason. All human beings are, to some extent, neurotic, and we can find out how neurotic we are by asking ourselves how often we react under the influence of feeling instead of reason. The percentage of times we react according to feeling will indicate how neurotic we are. Here are some examples. Our feelings are hurt, for instance, and then we get angry, or cry, or throw tantrums, or withdraw from reality, or pretend to be ill. We use any of the thousands of escape doors to flee from the reality of life. Or we become ill and feel hopeless, even though the doctor tells us we are not. Or something happens, and we feel fear out of proportion. And once again, we escape through the always open doors of flight. What does a non-neurotic person do when they are hurt, or sick, or afraid? They tell themselves they are mistaken, or that the other person did not do it with bad intentions, or that it is not an irreparable case, or that it is absurd to get angry, cry, or everything else. And they continue taking care of their affairs, forgetting the incident, and without an emotional hangover. We must not forget that it is the accumulation of emotional hangovers that eventually causes the almost unbearable burden of acute neurosis. Let us now address the question of what we can do to preserve our sound judgment, to control our emotions and feelings, and to keep our neurotic tendencies to a minimum. All members of Alcoholics Anonymous have a basic formula to achieve this goal, which is embodied in the 12 steps. The last 3, called the maintenance steps, are particularly valuable for establishing a foundation, not only for a spiritual life, but also for a balanced and sensible life. However, in today's world, with its constant pressures, we believe we have a much greater need to ensure emotional stability, sound judgment, or at least some degree of adaptation. The 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous guarantee sobriety, spiritual growth, and some serenity to anyone who sincerely practices them. But there is more, and more people seem to need something additional that ensures their emotional stability and allows them to face the growing number of emotional problems that everyone encounters today, including the sober alcoholic or drug addict. This is why we humbly offer suggestions, not for achieving sobriety, but for balance. We have compiled them over the course of 20 years of sobriety and have found them to be very helpful. Let's begin. Number 1. And maintain a simple life. Philosophers tell us that the soul of man is a simple substance. It does not tolerate friction, division, or agitation within itself. But friction comes from the outside, primarily from the material part of man, the body. And this is where difficulties begin. Everything that is added creates a future need that may become an irritant. Therefore, the increase of needs is the seedbed of frictions, divisions, indecisions, resentments, and fears, etc. Let us take an example from the modern world. All the so-called necessities of life are necessary for modern man. His ancestor did not need any of them. They did not exist. Their absence did not cause friction, resentment, or indecision. But now, when someone loses or does not have something, many of these modern conveniences open the door to friction, resentment, tension, nervous disorders, emotional problems, and the breakdown of sound judgment. We are far from condemning the use of the wonderful modern miracles for our well-being that God has given us. But the fact remains that as we add more needs to life, we add more opportunities for the indicated troubles to arise if we lose these additions. The fewer our needs, the fewer opportunities there will be for frictions of any kind. There is an axiom that says, necessity is the mother of invention. We believe a more appropriate corollary to this axiom would be, excess of needs is the mother of tension. Simplicity in living completely avoids this. Our soul is simple. We complicate it ourselves, and life as well, by adding and adding and adding more demands from our ego, first to our body and its ever-growing needs, then all the other material needs of every kind. The final result is a very complicated life, with all its consequences. No wonder so many people are confused. Alcoholics Anonymous has focused our attention on two very important principles that greatly help simplify life. 1.1. The habit of making decisions. Once this becomes a habit for us, then it does not matter what happens in life, since we will immediately make the decision to change or accept. It is not losses or pain, or even fears that cause the difficulties of life. It is refusing to make a decision about whether to accept or change them. And in this way, we attempt to remain in a neutral situation. This is intolerable for the human soul, and here an emotional problem arises. There are inner difficulties. Absolute and unreserved decision simplifies almost all the problems of life. 1.2. The danger of resentments. We believe there is nothing in life so harmful to personality, nor so responsible for complications in life as resentments. Experience shows that practically every emotional problem in life is, in some way, linked to resentments. We cling to our wounds. The word resentment itself, as a decision, gives us a clue. It comes from two Latin words, red and sentir, meaning to feel again, And also in this case, resentment complicates every action that motivates it. It is astonishing to what extent resentful people go, and the complicated methods they use just to get even. How can this be simplified? By practicing letting go of the idea. One must refuse at all times and forever to feel it again. One must abandon the idea. Number 2. Avoid becoming ill over pending concerns. Anyone who has bought a new automobile knows all the noises that are heard when it is new. Why? Because they are looking for them. As a result, the defects of the automobile that a year later would not have deserved any attention at all, from the beginning, become causes of strong protests against the seller, all because we are excessively cautious and too attentive regarding the operation of the engine. Even the normal vibration present in all engines frightens the buyer of a new automobile, who listens and watches for every small defect. The same happens with human nature, which has more defects, though of minor importance, than a common engine. And if we look for them, we will not only find them, but we will imagine they exist even when they are not real. Physically, we will be at the mercy of every small pain or discomfort, and will increase our friction against pains and discomforts that do not exist. We observe the hypochondriac. Physically, he is a victim of the proverb, "He who looks for trouble finds it." Emotionally, the person who concentrates on himself is at the mercy of endless sensations, fears, phobias, blindness, insomnia, and many other things. Such a person must realize, once and for all, that all mortals have innumerable imperfections, especially now in this frantic and tense world in which we must live, whether we like it or not. And although the manifestations of these imperfections, in the multitude of forms taken by those fears and undefined feelings that come so frequently to many, are very distressing, they are not dangerous, and most of them will disappear if we ignore them. But they will grow if we pay attention to them, if we look for them, or worry too much about them. One thing is certain: the less we look, the less we will find. Number 3. Learn to like work. As the work week becomes shorter and shorter, and with mandatory retirement or other forms arriving at an earlier age, it may seem naive to the modern world to suggest that man should learn to like his work. Nevertheless, we read in Scripture that man is born to work, just as the bird is born to fly. Therefore, it is natural for man to work. He is born to work. It is healthy if he also learns to like his own work. Indeed, here is a question. How many of you do not like your work? How many of you only do your work out of the need to earn money and without love? But what makes it so difficult to learn to like work? Why are there so many who resist work? Why does work seem to be so difficult? Human nature automatically rebels against effort, but much of the effort required in work comes from our doubt toward it. And much of the effort would change that rebellious attitude into one of understanding that work is good for man, that work ennobles man, that good mental health, especially emotional health, requires work to maintain balance. With this conviction, the worker will perform his tasks not only with greater productivity, but they will also become more attractive to him. This is a very essential part of sound judgment. 3 things can contribute to destroying this attraction to work or preventing this attitude from being obtained. 3.1. Not working in a relaxed manner. Any act in life carried out by a tense person eventually becomes a burden. So if we work under tension, it will certainly never seem attractive or satisfying. In doing so, we eventually rebel and will change or withdraw into emotional problems or from life itself. The so-called drifter resents work in any of its forms and therefore constantly flees from it, from reality, and from life. 3.2. Overworking. The person who is so absorbed in work that he labors 12, 14, even 18 hours a day will eventually also destroy his attraction to work. Anyone who likes work so much should soon realize that only a prudent schedule will keep it permanently attractive. Virtue lies in the middle ground. Anything done in excess will destroy itself. This is one of the laws of nature. There are many people who have worked with such excess that it has led them to serious nervous breakdowns, whereas, if they had done so prudently, they would have avoided these problems. One must learn to like work. If someone already likes it, they must not overdo it, because overproduction brings destruction. 3.3. There is another saying in Latin, festina lente. Translated, it means slowly, there is no hurry. Applied to work, it indicates that we achieve much more and work with greater satisfaction when we do not rush. Hurry causes errors, destroys attraction to work. It has never produced a masterpiece. Let us not forget the advice of the cleaning lady. So much work, hard work, but not in a hurry. When I sit, I relax completely, and when I lie down, I fall asleep. Would it not be good if we all did this instead of taking a sleeping pill? That is why the best sound judgment regarding work is to take things calmly, not overdo it, but reach the middle point. Number 4. Have a good hobby. This may seem redundant, but it is surprising to see how few people in the modern world even have a hobby. Nevertheless, we know that many emotional ailments and difficulties would be avoided, and many others cured if we had a good hobby. What is a good hobby? A good and effective hobby in life is to have some activity we would prefer to pursue above any other in the world. Thus, we would always have that hobby at hand when any type of difficulty arises. Let us take an example. We suffer a great loss in life, whether of a loved one or something material. This loss in itself will not cause emotional difficulties, but dwelling on it will. However, a hobby that is at hand to cling to will prevent rumination and hinder the development of many emotional disorders. This applies not only in the most important circumstances of life, but also to the normal and small emotional disturbances that arise day by day in the life of every human being. A hobby is life's best safety valve. The greatest difficulty in having a good hobby is that each person must find their own. No one can give another person a hobby. Each person must find theirs. We must look for it. If we must go elsewhere, we must continue searching, since the one who finds it will be the one who benefits. Number 5. Practice being satisfied. Human nature tends to be dissatisfied. This is as old as the human race, from which it follows that when we obtain what we desire, we no longer want it. Dissatisfaction began in Eden with Adam and Eve. Remember, God had given them everything. There was only one forbidden thing. They could not eat the fruit from a certain tree in paradise. But they were not satisfied and ate the fruit. By nature, we tend to be dissatisfied. We must practice being satisfied in order to counteract this natural tendency that can cause so many difficulties and unhappiness. Otherwise, dissatisfaction breeds tension, resentments, indecision, fears, emotional disorders of all kinds. being satisfied with our circumstances in life is a fundamental ingredient of sound judgment. The golden thread woven through this practice is the habit of acceptance. As we grow older, we increasingly realize that we cannot change most things in life, but it is rare that there is any circumstance we cannot, with God's grace, accept. This does not mean we should not try to improve our situation, far from it. But while trying to improve it, we must make the determination that we will be satisfied with whatever results from our efforts, whether success or failure. Once everything has been said and done, it is God who allows failure or grants success. Consequently, dissatisfaction with life really means dissatisfactions with God. Many people could have much greater satisfaction in life if they reduced their aspirations. How many men persist year after year in trying to achieve the impossible, yet are too proud to admit their limitations, and, as a result, are always dissatisfied and emotionally disturbed. After all, if things are not satisfactory, we, through our acceptance, can make them satisfactory. This ingredient is needed to obtain sound judgment. Number 6. God is not the editor of choices. It is amusing to hear assertions such as, "Of course it must be true. I read it on some website or in some magazine." And, although it may be an exaggeration, it is nevertheless a fact that, for many people, the magazine, the newspaper, television, radio, cinema, the internet, and the advertising council have become the providers of dogma in the modern home. Only God knows the emotional problems that arise day by day by offering people an unreal life and by bringing into homes, as dogmatic truth, the fallacies that the primary objective of life is the acquisition of material goods. We believe these practices are destructive to the soul, since it is well known that millions of people are guided by these media toward the pursuit of the impossible in life, and therefore become discontented, frustrated, neurotic, and sunk in other problems too numerous to mention. We could write volumes about the above, but we must move on. It is enough to say that no one is as exposed to emotional conflicts as those who use the mentioned media as guides for their lives. We can protect ourselves and our children if we constantly remember the following. All these media are only entertainment. A small dose may be useful, but an excessive dose can be harmful. Number 7. Learn not to expect everyone to like you, and practice cheerfulness. Contrary to general opinion, not everyone is so-and-so. However, one of the basic reasons many people do not get along with others is because, deep down, they are convinced that everyone is willing to take advantage of others. It is true that all human beings are imperfect, but it is also true that almost everyone is sincere and does the best they can with what they have. This should make us understand that, had we been born and raised under the same circumstances, we would not be different. The attitude that not everyone must like us will make our relationships less tense. A great help is the practice of cheerfulness, which must be exercised day by day. Furthermore, we must convince ourselves that all human beings, regardless of class, religion, or position, are children of God. Thus, our reactions toward others will always be the same. Number 8. Make use of adversity. It is innate in human nature to rebel against adversity, but this rebellion only makes it harder to endure. Instead, by using it, we can learn and grow. 8.1. See adversity as the will of God. Everything that happens is permitted or caused by God for our good, even if we do not understand it. 8.2. Learn from adversity. Adversity is the starting point of maturity. Many great men grew thanks to it. Number 9. Make the present moment count. This means using each moment correctly. Working when appropriate, resting when necessary, praying when it is time for prayer. Using the present well avoids emotional problems derived from indecision. Number 10. Learn to ignore irritations. Many people become nervous because they react to every small annoyance. Ignoring irritations is an art that protects emotional health. Number 11. Practice objectivity. This is one of the most important elements of sound judgment. It means stepping outside the self and focusing on others. It is the basis of humility and protection of emotional balance. 11.1 Objectivity tells us that feelings are not facts. This is not only the first axiom, but the fundamental one. Almost all neurotics or emotionally disturbed people confuse feelings with facts. For this reason, they rarely identify their difficulties. They feel them, and many times they do not even exist. Their difficulties are felt, and many times they do not even exist in reality, as is the case with vague anxieties and fears. Feelings are not facts. Therefore, it is much better to judge by acting than by feeling. The only guide to follow is logic, intelligence, objective truth. What is objectivity? Some years ago, when the undersigned was a patient in a clinic, every morning the doctor used to ask, "How are you doing?" Under the influence of a wave of depression, we always answered, "We feel terribly bad." And then, with emphasis, he replied, "I know. I did not ask how you felt. I asked how you were doing. Feelings are not facts." On another occasion, a young man was in his first job. Around 2 in the afternoon, he entered his boss's office and asked if he could go home, because he did not feel well. The boss replied, "Young man, there is a truth that is never too early in life to learn, nor too late to forget. And the truth is, almost all the work done in this old world, in which people labor daily, is performed by people who do not feel well. We fear we may not have many more years to tell this story, because soon, 2 in the afternoon, will be the time to leave." All abnormal fears and anxieties are based on feelings, and not on facts. And people who have them must reach the point where they can answer, what exactly are the facts? We decide by logic, not by feelings. Feelings are not facts. Hypochondria is disease caused by basing one's judgments and conclusions on feelings, and not on facts. This is also the case with scrupulosity, certain types of depression, discouragement, anxiety, and many other types of emotional and nervous afflictions, too numerous to mention. But we can, if we wish, gradually acquire the habit of practicing objectivity, convincing ourselves through habit that feelings are not facts. 11.2 Feelings that are not based on facts will disappear under objectivity. This axiom of objectivity is more easily explained through some examples. Take the example of a neurotic person who is subject to various sensations that frighten them or mistakenly point to a series of physical conditions that, in turn, scare them. Suppose they are subject to sharp pains in the sternum and are convinced it is angina. However, the doctor tells them their heart is fine, that the pain is imaginary. What can we do to make the pain disappear and demonstrate that it is imaginary? This can be done simply by practicing objectivity and without the need for absolutely any pill. All we have to do is identify the pain, then literally place our finger on it and look at it for a long time, objectively. Incredible as it may seem, if the pain is imaginary, it will disappear. There are thousands of members who can verify this, since they have used and continue to use this practice very effectively to overcome all kinds of imaginary discomforts. The same happens with all types of sensations, which are sensations and not facts. Another simple method similar to practicing objectivity to eliminate sensations not based on facts is the following. Take a watch with a minute hand, place your hand or finger, and point in the direction where the pain is felt. Then count a few seconds until the sensation disappears. Surprisingly, it will disappear shortly afterward. Certainly, there is nothing mysterious about this. Everything leads us to confirm that the pain or sensation existed only in our minds and not in the facts. And as soon as the mind concentrated objectively, there was no longer room for the sensation. Sensations not based on facts disappear before objectivity. That is a fact. We must practice it many times. 11.3. The practice of objectivity tells us that no matter how frightened we are, or how depressed, or how bad we feel, we can always move our muscles. Even writers on spiritual matters use this practice of objectivity when they advise fleeing in cases of certain temptations. Anyone suffering from emotional problems, especially if anxiety or depression is present, can use this practice very effectively. Indirectly, the good doctor who treated us at the clinic was trying to instill this habit when he emphasized doing over feeling. Furthermore, this will break the usual excuse of the neurotic who constantly says, I can't get up. I feel too bad. I can't work. I feel terribly bad. I can't do anything about it. I can't relate to people. And so on endlessly. Some years ago, a person called me long distance. This was her problem. She was an Alcoholics Anonymous woman who had met an individual. Emotionally, she felt she had fallen in love with him. The day came when she realized that, in reality, she did not love him. She panicked. Then she called us and said, I can't do anything about this. What do you mean you can't? We asked. She answered, I simply can't. Then how are you calling us? She answered, by phone. In other words, we told her, you picked up the phone, called the operator, and told her whom you needed to speak with. That's how you called us. Well, yes, she murmured. Well, we explained, you have 2 hands, 2 feet, 2 lips, a tongue, and the ability to use all of this. So when you hang up, simply do this. Move from there, pick up the phone, call the operator, speak with the individual, and tell him goodbye. We are finished. And do you know what happened? She did it. She left from there. This is applicable to all phases of life: mental, spiritual, moral, physical, emotional, and social. We omit many things in life because we are blocked by the sensation of fear or discouragement. Our entire personality and life will benefit greatly if we simply learned, once and for all, that we can leave wherever we are being harmed. We must do it now. 11.4. Self-diagnosis is never objective. The doctor who prescribes for himself has a foolish patient. Every lawyer who defends himself has a foolish client. And every priest who absolves himself has a fool for a penitent. This was perfectly understood in the ancient Roman axiom. Self-diagnosis is never objective. This is the reason why Alcoholics Anonymous tells us in the 5th step that we must admit to another human being. That is, self-diagnosis is never objective. It is the reason why emotionally confused people, neurotics, hypochondriacs, etc., end up having so many discomforts when in reality There is no fundamental physical ailment. It is not objective, and, therefore, it is not real. To use more pleasant terms, the doctor says, it is not physical, it is only functional. What can a sensible person do about this? The person who wishes to overcome or avoid emotional conflicts does not diagnose their own condition. They seek a competent doctor or psychiatrist and then follow their diagnosis. The same applies to spiritual life. The scrupulous person cannot hope to cure their scruples unless they place themselves in the hands of a competent spiritual counselor, accept the diagnosis, and follow it blindly with faith. This is objectivity. Self-diagnosis is never objective. 11.5. Objectivity indicates that almost all hesitation comes from fear. Fear is present in the lives of almost all people, to a greater or lesser degree, and in many cases what superficially appears to be merely indecision and hesitation is actually, at its core, fear. Fear and inactivity are sisters. Fear paralyzes action. Fear freezes emotional, mental, and spiritual life. For this reason, there is a maxim in practice that says any action is preferable to no action. Spiritual writers have advised us for centuries to act against fear, to do what we are afraid to do, all of which again indicates that almost all hesitation is fear. Let us take some examples. Why does the alcoholic hesitate to accept help, to stop drinking, or to attend an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting? Fear. They fear that intangible emptiness they must face if they accept help, stop drinking, or attend an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. This same phenomenon of hesitation occurs in many members of Alcoholics Anonymous who delay practicing the 12 steps. They fear becoming committed or fear that nothing would remain for them in return. Sometimes they are afraid of God. Therefore, they hesitate. Basically, there are two types of fear, intellectual and emotional. Intellectual fear comes from knowledge. These are fears based on facts. Reason or faith, united with action, are the solutions to intellectual fear. However, when fear is felt, whether due to real or imagined danger, these fears are emotional. They dissipate only through action. Hesitation is fear. 11.6. Practicing objectivity will indicate, do not take things so seriously. This is used in almost all areas of Alcoholics Anonymous, because an alcoholic needs, above all, a sense of humor. Only by acquiring a true sense of humor can one live with their past and, despite it, move forward. Laughter, cheerfulness, and a sense of humor are a great protection against emotional conflicts. All neurotics have a great need for a sense of humor. They take themselves too seriously and tend to turn every incident of life into a capital offense. One must not take things too seriously. One must learn to laugh at circumstances. Almost all of them are truly very amusing. One must learn to laugh with others and, above all, acquire the habit of laughing at oneself. Sometimes it is difficult, especially for those who are not accustomed to doing so, but it is a great protection against emotional and mental conflicts. 11.7. It is not objective to judge symptoms as dangerous. Many symptoms of illness frighten people more than the actual illness, but later we will see. All nervous symptoms are distressing, but not dangerous. To avoid judging nervous symptoms as dangerous, it is first necessary to seek a medical diagnosis regarding our condition. So if the doctor says that dreadful sensation is only nervous, we must not judge it as dangerous. Nerves do not kill, but they can certainly frighten the one who refuses to accept the doctor's diagnosis. As long as one ignores the symptom, as we have said, one will succeed in eliminating it. Remember, all negative things in life disappear in the face of neglect, and sensations and symptoms that are not based on reality are negative. Number 11.8. Objectivity indicates that expectation in itself is not harmful, but it must be calm, not fearful. It must be expectation, not discouragement. Anticipating tomorrow, daydreaming, is good from time to time. A little of this sometimes helps relaxation, but we must always remember that this should never be done with fear or discouragement. If so, it will be very emotionally destructive. Such people generally have thoughts such as, "I will never improve morally. I will never be emotionally well." Of course they will not. They have already decided not to be. These people usurp the place of God or the doctor. They are guilty of false prognosis in terms of recovery. This is sabotage. If we are not to diagnose ourselves, then certainly we are not the ones to give a prognosis about our condition. The only person qualified to give a rational prognosis about our physical condition is the doctor, and the only one who can give a prognosis about the moral condition is God, through his ministers. So let us not be guilty of sabotage by usurping other roles. This is extremely irrational, and leads to discouragement and self-pity, as well as other ailments that follow as a consequence. We must not forget that the first, and by far the most important of the ingredients necessary to be well or to improve emotionally, physically, or mentally, consists of following the judgment and prescription of the doctor or religious minister. No one is a good judge of their own case. Number 11.9. Objectivity means being tolerant of one's own mistakes. This is one of the most difficult tasks in life, but it is a reality, and as we grow older, we become more aware that most of us continue making mistakes, sinning, having faults, until the day of death. But this will not harm us unless we refuse to admit and tolerate our faults. We are only very weak human beings, full of defects, and we remain so all our lives. We can say that becoming emotionally angry does not harm us, but when we become angry, because we became angry, then we are in trouble. We must have the courage to make mistakes, because objectivity tells us that everyone makes them. Otherwise, all eraser manufacturers would soon go bankrupt. The courage to make mistakes must be followed by sincerity, to admit them and accept them as our own, not as victims of circumstances. Spiritually, we are told to pray for our own sins or faults, not for yours or someone else's. Many become discouraged because, after many years, they have progressed very little. The saints, who were the first to admit their faults, were always surprised not to be worse. That is reality. That is objectivity. So you are a sinner. What difference does it make? We all are. Number 11.10. Through the words of Thomas Merton, we learn an objective truth. The more one tries to avoid suffering, the more one suffers. This is one of life's enigmas, but also one of its realities. It happens to many people. Even the hypochondriac goes through many hardships and anxieties while trying to avoid them. We also all know cases of individuals who work 24 hours a day just to avoid work. We said before that man is born to work, just as the bird is born to fly. The same applies to suffering. We will suffer. The less we try to avoid it, the more we will accept it, and by expecting it, it will be easier to tolerate. Fighting it will only aggravate it, just as friction aggravates a wound. For the Christian, suffering is not only expected, but also sought. Fill up within yourselves the sufferings of Christ, St. Paul tells us. Number 11.11. Another objective fact in practicing objectivity is that perfection is the rarest of virtues. The title, The Myth of Perfection, was created with the idea that most people do not realize that perfection is beyond the reach of the average individual in this life. There we pointed out that a human boss expects and demands results. Almighty God expects and demands only a sincere effort of goodwill. Many emotional problems are forged by expecting too much from ourselves and from life. And many emotional difficulties are created in children by teaching them to expect too much from themselves. Some of the goals imposed on children by parents can never be reached. It is no surprise that we are raising more and more neurotic and frustrated individuals. God tells us to be perfect. This is the final goal. We expect to begin now and attain it in eternity. He knows us better than we know ourselves. Therefore, He knows the weaknesses of human nature. He demands perfection of goodwill, not perfection of action. There is no limit to the height of the goal, but many try to reach it too quickly. That is why perfection is the rarest of virtues. Most people stumble over their own pride and vanity along the way. Number 11.12. All the previous points about objectivity lead us to the conclusion that practicing moderation and setting aside the exceptional is an absolute necessity for emotional balance and sound judgment. No matter who we are, the objective truth is that we are only ordinary human beings, not exceptional. This is when difficulties arise. This creates the emotional type of disappointment, so commonly found in the breeding ground of alcoholism, and also in the emotionally confused person. Very frequently, the latter cannot tolerate being among people, and, at the same time, feels terribly desolate. This phenomenon occurs whenever someone thinks they are above the group, below the group, or against the group. Such a person has created loneliness for themselves. The presence of people does not eliminate loneliness. One can feel very alone in the midst of thousands of people. Loneliness is internal and arises from the false convictions that we are exceptional. To eliminate an emotional problem, we must begin by convincing ourselves, once and for all, that we are ordinary, and then we must continue practicing, rejecting the exceptional. Number 11.11. Another objective fact in practicing objectivity is that perfection is the rarest of virtues. The title, The Myth of Perfection, was created with the idea that most people do not realize that perfection is beyond the reach of the average individual in this life. There we pointed out that a human boss expects and demands results. Almighty God expects and demands only a sincere effort of goodwill. Many emotional problems are forged by expecting too much from ourselves and from life, and many emotional difficulties are created in children by teaching them to expect too much from themselves. Some of the goals imposed on children by parents can never be reached. It is no surprise that we are raising more and more neurotic and frustrated individuals. God tells us to be perfect. This is the final goal. We expect to begin now and attain it in eternity. He knows us better than we know ourselves. Therefore, He knows the weaknesses of human nature. He demands perfection of goodwill, not perfection of action. There is no limit to the height of the goal, but many try to reach it too quickly. That is why perfection is the rarest of virtues. Most people stumble over their own pride and vanity along the way. Number 11.12. All the previous points about objectivity lead us to the conclusion that practicing moderation and setting aside the exceptional is an absolute necessity for emotional balance and sound judgment. No matter who we are, the objective truth is that we are only ordinary human beings, not exceptional. This is when difficulties arise. This creates the emotional type of disappointment, so commonly found in the breeding ground of alcoholism, and also in the emotionally confused person. Very frequently, the latter cannot tolerate being among people, and, at the same time, feels terribly desolate. This phenomenon occurs whenever someone thinks they are above the group, below the group, or against the group. Such a person has created loneliness for themselves. The presence of people does not eliminate loneliness. One can feel very alone in the midst of thousands of people. Loneliness is internal and arises from the false convictions that we are exceptional. To eliminate an emotional problem, we must begin by convincing ourselves, once and for all, that we are ordinary, and then we must continue practicing, rejecting the exceptional. Number 12. Live and let live. In order to live and let live, we must first have an overall view of life and see some of the circumstances that affect our emotional life. Only by understanding and accepting them will it be possible for us to truly live. Only then can we learn to let live. Living and letting live contributes greatly to sound judgment. Number 12.5.4. In our social contacts, people or neighbors, we live by contributing our part to the community. We are a part of the community. In turn, we owe it a part of ourselves, living. And if neighbors or people are occasionally somewhat eccentric, we must let them be so. We must let them live. Or if they are black, we must let them live. This is adapting to reality, the reality that tells us that all men are equal before God. Blacks, whites, yellows, reds, Catholics, Protestants, Jews, rich, poor, healthy, sick, good, etc. And that, despite this, friction will suppress our lives. That is the conviction. Live and let live. Number 12.5.5. In the life of emotions, those strange sensations or impulses, living, one must learn to practice self-expression, practice a hobby, have an outlet. Otherwise, they will demand one. Living, they must not be repressed. At this point, we believe it is necessary to explain the term repression and see how dangerous it is for a solid emotional life, especially how it differs from control and neglect. The latter we advise. The former will always cause emotional problems. Repression is not suppression, nor control, nor neglect. Repression means denying the existence of an emotion or a passion. It frequently happens when, completely, parents tell their child, "There is no such thing. Forget it." Psychologically, it is often possible to deny something, or forget it, or deny its existence. This is repression. But nature is loyal to itself, and eventually will demand expression through an emotional illness. This is applicable in the emotional life of every man. We must understand our emotions, accept them, and practice control over them. This is, in reality, objectivity. This is allowing emotions to do what they were intended to do in life. This is normality. Repression is abnormal. Self-expression, within the limits of morality and reason, is absolutely necessary to obtain a healthy and balanced emotional life. So we must let live. We must let them be released. We must release ourselves, that is, always within reason and morality. It is not within the scope of this book to list all possible forms of expression, but we would like to mention a couple that have been accepted as very effective. The use of the hands and the use of the voice. Let us draw our conclusions. Number 12.6. In spiritual and moral life, one must live, one must pray. If one is too busy to pray, one is in danger of having two kinds of difficulties, spiritual and emotional, and practice believing, trusting, using God and religion, if one has any. Let live. One must allow others to worship God in their own way. If the other person is a sinner, even a great sinner, one must leave him in God's hands. God will, in any case, do a much more effective job. Number 12.5.7. In Alcoholics Anonymous, which is sound judgment, sobriety. Everything concerning Alcoholics Anonymous is suggested. One must live Alcoholics Anonymous in one's own way, but live it. One must allow others to live their program in their own way. We could expand much more on this subject, but we will simply conclude with a quote from a letter from a subscriber received by Bill W., the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. It is one of the glories of Alcoholics Anonymous that the individual makes his choice in AA matters without expecting interference or criticism from his companions. We could project the same idea to all the brotherhood of man in the world. We could say, in fact, and we will say, everyone has the right to make their own choices in life without expecting the slightest interference from their fellow human beings. But by the same token, every human being owes their fellow human beings the courtesy of allowing them to make their own choices in their own way. This is living and letting live. This is solid sobriety. This is true maturity